All right, everyone, welcome to our week 6 live classroom. Congratulations on finishing up your first over a third of the course. But if you didn't know, we do have 3 exams in this class and you guys just finished your first one. So congrats. With any general questions on the exams, I did make 2 videos, one for part A and one for part B of the exam. And I walk through all the answers and why they are what they are. But if you have any further questions after that or more specific questions, just shoot me an email. All right, well, without any further ado, let's look at chapter 6. In this chapter, we're looking at selection. So selection is how a computer seems to think, okay? So if I click on something and a window pops up and says, hey, there's an error, or you know, something else has to happen first, different things like that. Very frequently, it's because of selection inside the code that's running. It makes it so that the computer can make decisions, okay? This will always be done evaluating if a condition is true or false. And one very common type of selection statement is an if statement, okay? If statements and other selection statements will always use relational operators, okay? I guess there are some examples where you don't have to use relational operators, but they will always equate to a Boolean value. So looking at this table here, I could say if I is less than 3, or if X is greater than Y. Notice the syntax here. So I have an if, just the word if, it's a reserved keyword in JavaScript. And then I have parentheses. Inside the parentheses, that is what equates to either true or false, okay? So if I had, say, a Boolean variable, okay, if I said var x equals true, then I could just put, inside of parentheses, I could just put x, okay? If x, then do something. But it's also extremely common to see these different relational operators, okay? We have less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, is equal to, and is not equal to. Okay, you'll notice if you Google it, JavaScript relational operators. Let me find a good one here. You'll notice also there's a triple equals and a triple not equals and so forth. These are very similar to the double, okay? So this is just is equal to, and this checks for if the value and the type are the same, okay? So if I wanted to look at an example of that, if I just open up my developer tools here, and if I said var x equals, equals 5, okay, and if I said 5 is equal to x, okay, that'd be true, because it sees that 5 is the same value, okay, but they're not the same type, okay? This x is a string, I know because it's in quotation marks, and this 5 is a number data type, okay? If I said 5 is equal to x with a triple equals, then it says false, because yes, they're the same value, but they're not the same type, okay? So as you're looking around, if you see these triple equals or something like that, just know we won't really touch them much in this class, but they do exist. Okay. Any questions on these relational operators? Alrighty, so let's look at a couple of if statements here. In this particular case, so I have var balance equals 560, and then I say if balance is greater than 500, okay, given this chunk of code, it will always be greater than 500 at this point. And then we can create a variable called interest based on the balance, and then we can append that interest onto our balance, okay? Then down below, I can also say if balance is less than 550, which is false, okay? It was 560, we just added some interest onto it. You know, so I can have a bunch of if statements, I can have as many as I want, and all they mean is if this equation evaluates to true inside the parentheses, then I will execute the code inside of my curly braces. Okay, does that make sense? I'll take silence as a yes, hopefully. Okay, so looking at this, if I had a desk check, balance would be 560, and then once I say balance times 0.03, interest would be 16.8, and that would be added onto balance. Okay, just as a quick reminder, this plus equals is the exact same thing as if I did, so if I said 5 plus equals 1, whoops. So if I had var y equals 5, and I said y plus equals 1, then it would just append 1 onto y. Okay, that'd be the same thing as saying y plus plus. All right, that would append 1 also. And it's also the same thing as saying y equals y plus 1. Okay, so I think we covered those just last week. All right, so just as a reminder, these all do the exact same thing. All right, so let's keep going. If you have another condition, so if I said if something is true, then I want to do something, else would be used if I want to do something else outside of that condition. So in this case, if I have var sales equals 1250 and a bonus, I could say if sales is less than or equal to 1,000, then our bonus is going to be 20. Otherwise, it'll be 100. Okay, so anytime I have two scenarios to take into account, I can use an if statement and then an else statement. All right. Notice an else statement. I mean, if you think about it in English, you're always going to say if something, else, whatever. You know, an else statement always has to be paired to an if statement. Okay, if I came into here and I was like else console.log something, this would throw me a big old error. It says unexpected token else. Okay, and it's because it's expecting an if statement first. Anytime I have an else statement, I have to have an if statement. Let me clear that out. Okay, so if I said if, and then I have a condition, so if I could just say if true, and then I'd have my curly braces, and then in here I could say console.log it was true. Okay, so if true, then I'll log it was true, else something, and then I can just run this in here and see what it'll do. Okay, and you can see it logged it was true to the console. Okay, so an else statement, if you try to use it without an if statement, it will fail. It'll say else is undefined. So it is always paired to an if statement. Now, this makes sense in my mind. It gets a little bit complicated when you have nested if statements. I can have if statements inside of if statements, and the else is only paired to a single if statement, and we'll look at a couple examples of that. Any questions on this if else piece of code?
Herbert, I don't document those deaths chat. Is there a place where we can practice more of those, like just in general? Because that's where I grouped on the exam. Is I was using Google, but I must have put my numbers in wrong.
Okay.
So, is there a way that I can practice those a little bit more?
So, Shonda, sorry, you kind of broke up a little bit. So,
Oh, sorry.
no, it's okay. So are you saying if we have like more than two conditions that we have to account for, or more than two scenarios?
No, just in general. In general, is there somewhere where we can practice the desk check?
Oh, I gotcha. So right here, I'm kind of practicing it right here in the console of my developer tools. Okay, and so sometimes I'll practice things here. Notice that if in here, if I hit enter, it'll just run whatever I had. But if I need a new line, for whatever reason, I can hit shift enter and then I can keep on typing. Okay, so here's a good place to practice. Also, if you type in W3 Schools JavaScript if statement, you can use their little try it yourself editor, and it's pretty much the same thing. Okay, and you can come into here and be like, okay, well, there's an if statement. What would happen if I said else, and then I put something in here? You know, I could say like alert something. You know, so this is a really good place to practice also, just these little try it yourself editors. Does that help answer your question, Shonda?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, yeah, If it doesn't, feel free to ask again.
Okay.
All right. And then for the desk check part of your question, it can be a little bit tricky. Um, and I would say the easiest way to do that requires you to learn a little bit of how to use um, the developer tools. So let me pull up a program right here. Let's see here. So week 6, if I look at this first one, there's a single if statement. So I'm going to copy the file path and I will run this in my browser. Hit F12, go to my sources tab, open this up a lot, and put a breakpoint right here on line 22. Okay. I could type in like 50 and 10 and run my function. I can see exactly what number 1 is, exactly what number 2 is, exactly what absolute is. I can highlight this to see if it'll be true or false. It says false, so it'll skip that, and then I can see what will be output. Okay. You can do this with any size of program. You can stick a breakpoint in there. You can hit F10 to walk through it. It's just this button right here to step over next function call. There is an exercise in the class. I think you either did it last week or are going to do it this week, but also this video, our Chrome Developer Tools 3 video on sources. I talk a lot about debugging because that's where I'm at. I'm in the sources tab of the developer tools. So that's a really easy way to do desk checks because you just step through it one piece at a time. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. All right. If else statements. Okay. So we have this, nothing new here. We just looked at that one example. If I have more than 2 conditions, okay, so with that last example, I said, okay, either the bonus is going to be 20 or it'll be 100, and that's it, okay? But let's say I had like 10 different bonuses that that could be given depending on certain inputs or something. Or if I have multiple scenarios that I have to deal with, I can use an if, else if statement, okay? So use this when there are more than 2 choices and you have to worry, or that you have to worry about, okay? So here I say if age is less than 21, or if age is between 20 and 40, otherwise do the last thing, okay? So if I was gonna write this out real quick, let me open up our text editor. I'm gonna just copy my template into a new file, and I'll just save it to my desktop for now, and I'll just call it temp.html. In here, inside my template function, I'll go ahead and say if user input, let's go ahead and parse user input so I can use it as a number. So I'll say parse float, whatever the user typed in. So if user input is less than 21, then I'll go ahead and say, alert, your input was user input, okay? Else if, okay, notice my parentheses right here. Anytime I have an else if, it's basically like another if statement, but it's just another condition that we can check for. So I could say else if user input was equal to 50, okay, and I can do anything I want here. Then I could just say alert, you typed 50, and then I can say else, and then I could just say alert else. Okay, so notice a couple of different things. I can put these brackets all in the same line if I want to. So if I wanted to, I could move the else if right there. You'll see that in JavaScript a lot. Okay, this example right here does that, where it has the else if after the closing bracket of the if statement, and same with the else. It's also just as correct if you want to put those on a new line. Okay, either way is fine. It'll run them the same way. Okay, now let me run this real quick. So I'm going to copy the file path, put it into my browser, and run the function. Notice it says else. Okay, why do you guys think it would go into this else block when I ran it and didn't put anything in? What do you guys think?
You didn't type anything in the value, right?
Yeah, so it wasn't less than 21 because user input was undefined. It wasn't 50 because again, user input was undefined. So it just said, okay, well, it wasn't anything before this, so we'll go into the else. All right, if I type in 50 and run function, it says, wow, you typed 50. Okay, and then if I type in like 10, then it'll say, oh, your input was 10, and so it captured that in this first one. Okay, and so with this, I could have as many of these as I wanted. It, for whatever these are, I can have as many else ifs as I want. There's no limit. I just have to make sure that every time I have an else if, there's parentheses with a condition that will equate to true or false, and curly braces for each block of code that will run depending on that condition. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. Now, notice in here, there's quite a lot going on here. It's a little bit messy with all these else if statements. Okay, there is a better way to do this, and it's with something called a switch statement. Now, before I go into switch statements, if you never want to use one ever, you never have to. Okay, you can, if you would prefer, to always just use if, else if statements, and that is totally fine. They will both do the same thing. It is just a syntactical difference for how it is shown in the code. A lot of people think it's easier to read. And so let's look at it. So use it when there's a lot of choices that exist. Each choice is based on the same variable. Okay, that's really important. So when I have a switch statement, it will all be based on, let me just delete that real quick, a single variable. So in our example right here, I said if age is less than 21, or if age is from 20 to 40, okay, so we're using the same variable here for these conditions. We're using age, that's it. All right, so down here, I could say switch age, just put in whatever variable I have, and I could say if it's less than 20, if it's from 20 to 40, if it's 50, whatever, but it all has to be related to the same variable, okay? So I say switch, variable name, whatever we're gonna look at, and I say if that variable is f, if it's s, if it's j, if it's n, and else, okay? If it's none of those, then we'll have a default, and we'll have that default that we can use, okay? Now, one thing that you might notice, there's this break keyword inside of each one of these cases. The break keyword will get you out of the switch statement. So as soon as it finds that S, that class standing was equal to S, then I would say, okay, this is your register date, break, get me out of my switch statement. You don't have to use those in if statements or else ifs, okay? But if I didn't use a break right here, then it would keep on going and it would keep on checking, be like, oh, is it equal to J? Is it equal to N? Default, it would go into the default every single time if I didn't put a break in, and it would set my register date to none, even if class standing was equal to S. Okay, so breaks are really important because as soon as you get what you need out of your switch statement, you just break to get out of it. So yeah, any questions on our switch statement here?
So, Brother Birch, do you use either the switch in case or you use a what if statement, one or the other?
Yes. So let's say I went back over here. Let me change this to 60, this to 70, and this to 80. Okay, so I have this massive if statement that is pretty insignificant, okay, but for our testing purposes. If I wanted to write this exact same thing in a switch statement, let's go ahead and look at how we might do that. Whoops, sorry guys, my computer's wigging out. All right, so I have this if statement, okay, I'm just gonna go down here and I'll say switch, and look, it is based on a single variable, okay? I'm using user input in every single one of these statements. So I'll just put user input into here. So switch user input, and then I have my curly braces open up, all right? Everything inside of here will be my switch statement. So I'll say case, if it's less than 21, okay? Or I could say is equal to 50, or case is equal to 50, okay? And then I'd put that, and then I'd say alert, whatever we had up here. So you typed 50. Okay, oops, I don't need that. Okay, and then I would have to say break, take it out of it. Next one, I'd say case is equal to 60. And if that was true, then I'd alert, you typed 60. And then break. All right, and then after I've done all of them, I could say default, I could alert no match found or something like that, and then break. All right, so this will do something really similar. You can't do lesser thans, greater thans, or things like that. It has to just be equal to something. So where I would use a double equal here, I could just say case 50, case 60, case 70 or 80, and then it'd have a default to get everything else. Okay. So if statements are much more versatile, you can do a lot more. I could have different variables in here. I could have multiple conditions if I wanted inside of these parentheses. But a switch statement, a lot of people like, depending on the situation, if it's dealing with a specific variable, and there's a lot of different options that you have to take into account. Okay. Did that help answer your question?
Yeah, so people use both depending on what they want the outcome to be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Let's look at our next example here. All right. So imagine that we wanted to divide or look at odd and even integers. Okay. So divide the number by 2. If the remainder of the division is not equal to 0, the integer is odd. If the remainder of the division is equal to 0, then the integer is even. Okay, so let's look at that example. So in here I have an if statement. Okay, what does modulus do again? Do you guys remember?
It gives you the remainder.
Yeah, so if the user types in 5, okay, it would come in here as a string. We would parse that, so it'd be a number 5. And then I could say 5 modulus 2 would give us 1, okay, because 2 goes into 5 evenly twice into 4, and then we'd have 1 left over, okay? So 5 modulus 2 would be 1. So this would be false, okay? Because 5 modulus 2 is not equal to 0. And so we'd come into here and say, oh, 5 is an odd integer. If I type in 6, 6 modulus 2, 2 goes evenly into 6 3 times. So there's nothing left over. So 6 modulus 2 would equal 0. And we'd say 6 is an even integer. Okay. Any questions on this logic?
So do you always have to put it equal to 0?
Yeah, depending what you wanted to do. So this is how I could get an even integer. But let's say I was going to swap these, and I was going to say this one's odd and this one's even. Then I could say if this number is greater than 0 or is greater than or equal to 1, if I was trying to isolate that odd one, and that would still, this would do the exact same thing because we're not going to have any negatives using modulus. But this is the most common way to see if you're trying to find if a number is even or not. You just say number modulus 2. If that's equal to 0, then it's even. If it's not, then it's odd. So, but there's always more than one way to do it. Okay, right here I have an example. If number modulus 2 is not equal to 0, then that's odd. Okay, another way of writing if it's odd or not. These parentheses you wouldn't need, but you can put them there if that helps. If that makes more sense to you. Okay. All right. Quadratic formulas. Okay, you'll never have to do this in this class, so don't stress. A quadratic equation of the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, has 2 solutions called roots. The first has 2 roots, second has 1 distinct root, and the third doesn't touch the axis. Its roots are complex, which means it contains a square root of -1. Okay, so if I just look at the code here, we can use an if statement to see what it's going to be. Okay, so if the user types in 3 numbers, okay, we would get a discrete value b times b minus 4 times a times c. We declare these variables right here. We didn't assign them anything. But then in here, if discrete is greater than or equal to 0, then we'd get the roots. And if it wasn't, then we wouldn't have any roots. Okay. So if statements can be used for a lot of different stuff. All right. Finding roots in JavaScript. Are you guys interested in finding roots in JavaScript? Are you worried about it?
I have no idea.
Okay, we'll skip it because, like I said, you guys aren't going to have to do it in this class. I have never had to do this in a professional environment. I make websites, not like complex math things. So, but if you are curious about it, let me just pull this up. Wait, this is it. Okay. All right. Nested if statements. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. These are common, no matter what you go into. If you're making calculators or if you're doing something for a salesperson, nested if statements are very, very common. Okay. So it is when, if I have a condition, okay, if X is true, then I'm going to do something. I could also say if Z is equal to something, or if X was greater than 50, or, I could have an additional if statement inside of there. So in this example, we have input, total weekly sales for a salesperson. Processing, use table to compute commission. So if the sales was greater than or equal to 300, and the sales amount was less than 600, then the commission rate would be this. Okay, so we have several conditions here to get to our commission rate. Okay, and then the output would be the salesperson's commission. So if I look here, it looks like, oh yeah, right here. So this matches this table. All right, let me blow this up just a little bit. So if sales is less than 300, then rate is 0. Okay. If sales is less than 600, right here, okay, then rate would be 2%. And then we have another one over here. If sales is less than 1,000, then it'd be 2.5, and otherwise it'd be 3%. Okay. Now, there are other ways to write this exact same thing. Okay. We could write it without using a nested if statement, but we'd have to have more conditions inside of our if blocks of code. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to write this exact same thing without using nested if statements, then I could use this right here. Okay, if sales is less than 300, or if it's less than 600, or if it's less than 1,000. Okay, here's why this works. Because if sales is less than 300, it's going to go into here. Is any of this going to get executed if it's less than 300? The answer is no. Okay, the purpose of these selection statements, or if statements, is to run a specific piece of code depending on a value. Okay, so if sales was less than 300, we would execute this, and the next line of code to get executed would be way down here, line 47, after the entire if block of code. All right, now let's say it's 400. Let's say sales was equal to 400. This would be false, so we'd come over to this guy. 400 is less than 600, so we'd come into this. Rate would be equal to 0.02, and then we'd jump down to line 47 after this finished up. Okay, so I could do all these else if statements and things, and it would work just fine. A little bit confusing, but it would work. All right, but this will do the exact same thing, because if I have reached this point in the code, I know that sales is not less than 600. I know it's greater than or equal to 600 for it to reach here. Okay, if it reaches this, then I know that all of these were false, and I don't have to check for that. Okay, because if any of those had been true, it would have gone into those, and I wouldn't have gotten to this point in the code. Okay. But there are, so this example, you don't necessarily have to use a nested if statement, but there are many cases where you do have to use nested if statements. Let's look at this one. A sports team provides discounted tickets to students and seniors and rewards fans that attend multiple games. So right here, anytime we have an age from 0 to 17, we have these conditions. Okay, if they've attended 0 to 5 games, their ticket price will be $8. If it's 6 to 10 games and they're in this age group, it'd be $6, and so forth. And then each age group will have a different ticket price based on how many games they've attended. So just looking at this, again, we have two things that we're looking at here. We have age and we have games attended. All right. So if I came into here, sports games. Let me take that out. Wow, that's weird. All right. So if price, delete all that. Sorry, guys. So price, we just declared, and we'll assign it a value. So where we declare it here, I can use it in any place and it'll just change this variable, okay? So if age is less than 18, so these top three right here, 0 to 17, if age is less than 18, then we're gonna look at the games attended, okay? If games is less than 6, it's $8. If it's less than 11, so from 6 to 10, then it'll be $6. And if it's 11 and up, then it'll be $5, okay? So this is a very practical use of a nested if statement. All right. The next one is if age is less than 55. Okay, so here we said if it's 18 to 54. Okay, we already know that if we've reached this point in the code, it's at least 18, because if it wasn't, it would have gone into here, not into here. All right, so if age is less than 55 and they've attended less than 11 games, then their ticket price will be $10. Or if age is less than 55 and they've attended at least 11 games, then their ticket price will be $8. Okay, and then there's our last one for our seniors. Okay, so remember what I said. I know this is a lot, but remember what I said about our nested if statements. Okay, every else is connected to an if statement. All right, so this else right here doesn't care what this if statement did, because that's like its parent. Okay, it only cares about its immediate if statement that's like right above it. Okay, and then same with this guy right here, and same with these right here. Okay. Any questions on this? I'm going to run this in our browser with the debugger on, and we're going to watch this kind of walk through here. Okay, so if my age was 25 and I have attended 5 games, okay, so I put a breakpoint right here inside my function. I could hit this button to step over next function call, or I can hit F10 to do the exact same thing. So age is 25, games attended is 5. All right, so are we going to go into this if statement?
Nope.
Nope. Age is greater than 18. So I hit F10. Notice it skipped over this entire thing, and now it's down here. Is age less than 55?
Yep.
Yes. So I hit F10, and now we have a completely independent if statement. Doesn't care about what was before. Now we're in here, and now we're just going to check to see if games attended is less than 11. Okay, which will be true. Okay, we attended 5 games, and so we'll assign our price of $10. And then what line of code will be hit next? What do you guys think?
It'll say the price in the output div.
Perfect. Line 40. Okay, so if I hit F10, it jumps all the way down here. It's not going to touch any of this other stuff. All right, and we'll just assign our price of $10 to our output div, which will just show up right there. Okay, so debugging is super helpful for things like this, because if you have a lot of logic, if you have a bunch of if statements and something's not working how it's supposed to, like your shoes and galoshes and boots assignment for this week, debugging can really help. Be like, oh, that was supposed to go in here, why didn't it? Or it was supposed to go into this if statement, why didn't it? Okay. Any questions on this example? or comments? All right. Well, then let's keep going. If I have a bunch of if statements and an else statement, okay? So right here, you're going to see questions like this on your quizzes and your exams. So pay close attention. All right. Like I said, every else statement has a corresponding if statement. All right. So in this program, what do you think would be output to the user? Okay. We have message. Well, I guess we need to see. Let me open this up real quick. We need to see what X is. All right. So we get two values from the user, X and Y. We declare message as wave. And then we have all of this logic. And depending on certain conditions, we might assign message the value of hello or goodbye, and then we'll output message. Okay, so I'm going to copy this file path and run it. Okay, oh, man, there's funky stuff going on. Sorry, you guys. Okay, is there one more? What on earth? All right, let's try that. There, that looks better. Okay, please input an input for X. So I'm just going to put 3, and Y is 5. Okay, now let's look at our code. What do you guys think will be output to the user? Wave, hello, or goodbye?
Goodbye.
Okay, so let's look at it. X is equal to 3. So X is less than 2 is false. So we'll just go straight into here and it'd be goodbye. Let's wave and it's goodbye. Okay, let's put in X is 1 and we'll leave Y as 5. What do you guys think?
Hello. Never mind. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's look at it. I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. Let's run it. X is 1, Y is 5. I should have parsed those. Okay, so 1 is less than 2. Is that true? Yes, so we'll go into here. Now, is Y greater than 8?
No.
No. So where will the next line of code hit? Where are we going to hit next?
I'm guessing goodbye.
So knowing that this else statement is correspondent to this, okay, this was already true. So we're not going to go into this else statement no matter what, because we're inside of this if statement. So if this equates to false, we're going to jump all the way down to line 20, and message will remain as wave. Okay. Now, if I had put this else statement up a line, okay, now it's corresponding to that inside if statement. Okay, so if I ran this the exact same way with 1 and 5, come through here, is Y greater than 8? No. Now it's goodbye, because this else statement is connected to this if statement. Okay, it's all about where the curly braces are, and it's really helpful if you have things tabbed over the way that they should be. Okay, so in this case, message would be assigned to goodbye, and it would output goodbye. Okay, but when we had it down here, it wasn't connected to this if statement. So this was true, which means we would never touch this. And then this was false, so we just jumped down here. Okay. Nested ifs. All right. It'd probably be easier to read if I had something like this. Whoops. Okay. And I could see exactly, you know, oh yeah, this if statement has an else statement and this one has an else, you know, but so remember, it's all about the curly braces and where they are. All right. So the else will always come after a curly brace of its if statement. Okay. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Common mistakes: forgetting parentheses around a condition. Okay. If X is less than 7, that'll throw you a big old error. Okay. Don't forget your parentheses. That's how the computer knows what it's doing. Using assignment instead of comparison. All right, I'm gonna take a sec on this one. This one's huge. Okay, so down here, let's do this real quick. So if I say if x is equal to 2 and y is equal to 8, all right, I'm gonna come back in here and run this. All right, x is 2, y is 5. Let's run this. Is x equal to 2? Yes. Okay, is y equal to 8? No, so we'll jump down and that's fine. Now, watch this. If I come in here and made the mistake of using an assignment operator instead of a comparison operator, watch what happens. I'm going to refresh this, put 2 and 5 in here, and hit our button. Is x equal to 2? Yes. So we go in here. Is y equal to 8?
Yep.
Yes, yes it is, because we just assigned the value of 8 to y. Doesn't matter what the user typed in, we just said if y equals 8, and that's going to equate to true, and so we'll go into the if statement no matter what, okay? So anytime you have an equal sign, a single equal sign inside of an if statement, it will always be true, always, and it'll change your variable, okay? So remember, a single equals is an assignment operator. A double equals is a comparison operator. You will always use double equals or something similar inside of your if statements. Okay, you'll never use a single equals. All right. Okay, placing a semicolon at the end of an if-else statement. Okay, so here's a question. What would happen if I did this and put a semicolon right there? What do you guys think? Let's run it real quick and see. Oh, look at that little error coming up here. Uncut syntax error, unexpected token, else. Remember how I said that every else statement needs an if statement? If I put a semicolon after this if statement, I just ended that if statement, like as much as I can end it. And as far as this else is concerned, that if doesn't exist because we put a semicolon there, okay? So semicolons will end it and we'll throw errors. If you have your developer tools open, you'll see it and be like, wow, why is that saying unexpected token else? Well, it's because there's a semicolon there. Forgetting brackets, okay? Especially when you get into nested if statements, please, please, please use these curly braces, okay? It's extremely important, okay? Not only does it help your computer know what to do, but it also helps you know what's gonna happen, okay? So don't forget your curly braces. Putting condition on else statement. Notice every else statement we've written today does not have parentheses after it, okay? We had an else if statement that had parentheses, okay? If I wanted to check to see if like x was equal to 5 or something, you know. And so I could have an else if statement with parentheses, but an else statement will never have a condition. That would defeat the purpose of an else statement, okay? An else statement is to encapsulate every other option outside of whatever you've specified in your else ifs or if statements, okay? So we never put a parentheses on the else statements. And then using unnecessary comparisons when else can do the job. All right. So one example, let's go back to our nested ifs right here. Okay. There's a lot of unnecessary logic right here. All right. Where I can think about it and be like, okay, if sales is less than 300, it'll go into here. Which means if I get to this point, I know sales is at least 300 and I can just say if sales is less than 600. So if I get to this point, I know it wasn't less than 600, so I can just say it was less than, if it's less than 1,000. Okay. In addition to that, there are other ways to have more logic in here. And so just kind of think about that. It wouldn't necessarily, I mean, this still runs just fine. The output of this program will be exactly the same, but one's a lot more confusing. One, it will be easier to have errors in it. It'd be really easy in this case to miss a condition or to get something wrong, you know? And so simplifying it as much as possible will help you as you write your code, okay? All right, you guys, any questions on if statements? All right. Well, again, congrats on finishing up your first third of the semester. And if y'all have any questions while working on your assignments this week, just let me know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Have an awesome Tuesday, and I'll talk to y'all soon.